so we can make sure that other attendees who aren't able to attend live can listen in. And my name is Stephanie Cesario DiBiase. I live in Freeport. I have a background in environmental and agricultural education and started with Maine Community Foundation just within the past year. Previously, the past 5 years, I've been working a lot around outdoor access in Maine schools, doing farm and sea to school infrastructure. I'm also a Maine Master Naturalist, and I'm going to pass it to my colleague Katie to introduce herself as well.
I was going to say good morning, but it's afternoon. I'm Katie Howard. I am a community partner as well. And I coordinated this program last year. So a few of you, if these names look familiar, thank you for doing this again. And welcome our new people. Staff has taken this over. I sort of cover Cumberland and Oxford counties and some grant programs that are focused on those areas. I used to be at the Davis Conservation Foundation, so I've pretty familiar with this environment, the environment in Maine. But I'll just be backing up Steph as she's getting going, doing this the first time. So I'm just here to help answer questions as needed.
Thanks. We're so lucky to have Katie on board, and I wanted to share that this session is mostly me providing a data dump. I'm going to pause for questions, but please don't be shy to either use the raise hand feature to jump in with a question or a comment. You can use the chat, and you can also use the Q&A feature. So again, it'll be a lot of me talking, but please feel free to interrupt with questions and comments. Also, I'll try to pause for questions as well. And again, I'm recording this and sharing it out with other reviewers who aren't able to join live. So some of you are already familiar with us, but just in case, a quick overview. Maine Community Foundation, we meet our mission to build a better Maine by strategic giving, community leadership, and local expertise. So we offer a range of giving for over 2,000 donor-advised fund holders across the state. We do grant making for nonprofits and have 20 competitive grant programs. That's you today. You're helping with one of our competitive grant programs. We also have over 600 scholarship funds for Maine students and adult learners. We additionally have almost 300 nonprofits in Maine that we manage their assets and investment for through our nonprofit agency fund program. And within our different fund types, scholarship funds, donor advised funds, agency funds, designated funds, field of interest funds, we really touch all aspects of every Maine county and every Maine community. So our funding is incredibly broad and deep. And if you have questions about learning more about Maine Community Foundation, definitely check out our website, mainecf.org. Also, you can reach out to me directly about just getting more involved in some of our other programs and grants. So if you have immediate questions about Maine CF, feel free to use the chat. Otherwise, we'll get in a little bit specifically to our environmental grant programs. So here at Maine CF, right now we have 2 competitive environmental focused grant programs. The one that you are so graciously volunteering with as a reviewer is Maine Land Protection, which is really offering funding support for land acquisitions and conservation easements. We also have a second program called Conservation for All, which is more project and general support for building connections and access between people in Maine and the land and water. So both of these programs have the same deadline, and they to receive a grant for the Conservation for All program, the organization must be really facilitating access to land and water and engaging the communities. So for Conservation for All, it's a max of 15,000. Maine land protection, which again is what you're going to be reviewing, is a max of 50,000 and is less about the project organizational programming and more about the hard stuff of actual costs associated with the purchase of land or easements. So that's why it's a much larger grant award. So for Maine land protection, the funding can include for the purchase price, the closing costs, legal fees, any type of stewardship funds for the land. This year, we've received 17 proposals for Maine land protection that you will be reviewing. Just for some historical framing, last year, we received 23 proposals and were able to competitively award 5 of them. We also have a portal called Giving Together, where our donor advised fund holders can access proposals that aren't funded through this competitive review process. So eligible proposals are put up on this donor advised fund portal for 1 year. And you can see here in the additional grants by donors, there's an additional 13 proposals funded through this Giving Together donor advised fund portal. So we're doing this balance of your process as a reviewer is deciding the competitive awards, but we also try to get donors to pick up proposals and award additional funds on top of the competitive process. And I'm just curious, is this your first time reviewing proposals for Maine CF, or have you done it before? Just to see who we have today for a little mix here. We've got 9 out of 10 responses. Woo! Awesome. So you should be able to see the results. We actually have a split. So 60% of you, it's your first time doing this. So hopefully some of this additional context is helpful for those of you that are returning. Apologies if this is redundant at all, but hopefully it's a good refresher because a lot has happened in a year. So thank you to the 2022 reviewers who are really a part of this process here on the slide of deciding those awards. And as you can tell, this is an incredibly competitive grant program. It's large grants and it's statewide.
Steph, can I add one thing?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that sort of the reviews you guys are doing, we take those and we do sort of summarize them and we do share them with some of our donor advised funds, and that's can be part of those donor awards. So your feedback helps us sort of inform some donors as well.
That's really helpful context because it adds to the importance of your role as a reviewer and that the feedback you're giving is not just deciding the competitive awards, but also helping, we can use that feedback for helping with donor advised fund awards as well. So this is the criteria for this competitive grant program. Criteria in our language is required. So this is a criteria that a project proposal must meet in order to be eligible. And again, all of our eligible proposals go on this Giving Together portal for 1 year. So the proposed project for land conservation must be about creating or increasing permanent access to land and water, particularly to marginalized populations. And we have a little list of what that looks like. In particular, we're thinking about communities in Maine that identify as people with disabilities, people with low incomes, people with mental health conditions, Mainers with limited English proficiency, Black, Indigenous, or people of color, immigrants and refugees, and LGBTQ plus community members. And it's pretty broad. We're open to really any community that might have limited conservation opportunities or traditionally might have barriers to accessing a conservation trust, for example. So this is our required criteria. Additionally, we're thinking about, does this project have support from community members and stakeholders? So that could look like support from the town, the municipality, could look like support from local businesses, local nonprofits, schools. We really want to see, as Maine Community Foundation, our funding is rooted in community need and community involvement. So we really want to see that that's a strong piece of the proposal. Additionally, the last required criteria is there has to be some kind of vision or plan for the future stewardship of the land. So thinking less about just protect it and forget about it and more about what's the plan to actually keep people and communities engaged in this property over time. So these are like the big heavy hitters of what you're going to be looking at in your review process. And then they'll talk about our priorities and then I can pause for some questions. So priorities doesn't necessarily mean it's required, but these are additional parameters that help a proposal be more competitive for our pool. So priorities for this year in particular are around, is this grant a significant portion of the purchase price? Is this grant gonna like help the land trust secure other funds? Or is this grant gonna actually help complete a fundraising campaign? So this is a priority, it's not necessarily required. And I'll also just add that the priorities are evolving. Last year, the reviewers for this program, some of you on the call provided feedback, and we actually tweaked the application and priorities slightly based on your feedback from last year. So some of that's some wording and language. One aspect is we added in a map upload and really just trying to clarify and make really transparent the language of criteria and priorities on the website to the application to the review form that you'll be using that I'll show you in a minute. So additionally, we're thinking about, will this land conservation project benefit the communities and the economy surrounding? So we're actually thinking about community-based conservation. Is this going to support a working farm, a fishery, a working forest? Is this going to create outdoor recreation opportunities? Is this going to provide access to cultural resources or such as harvesting and wildcrafting? Is this going to be basically providing some kind of additional benefit to the community members? And our last priority is thinking about climate change and critical habitat, which to me are really linked. And we know that Maine won't wait. So Maine Climate Council's plan, Maine Won't Wait, has the goal of 30% of land in Maine conserved. Right now we're at 20%. So just the facet of this project conserving land does help address climate change, but we're also looking for proposals that can go a little above and beyond, that are helping the communities get educated about climate change or prepare for it or reducing impacts. One example is I'm reviewing I'm reading through the proposals right now, and like salt marsh and wetland protection in particular might have a strong impact on climate resilience with sea level rise. So these are the types of things we're thinking about. Again, they're not required, but can help us narrow down the pool. And then, so yeah, sensitive ecological areas. Are there some endangered species on the property? Is the property a particularly important wildlife corridor? So these are definitely priorities to keep in mind, and these are all going to be on your review form, so you don't have to remember all of these, but I'm going to just take a quick pause. So those are the criteria and priorities. Does anyone have questions right now thinking about these priorities? So benefiting communities' economy, addressing climate change, conserving habitat, paying significant portion of the price, completing a fundraising campaign, and then the basic criteria before I keep going. And if you have, you can use the Q&A or the chat or the raise hand feature if you have questions at this point. Anything you'd add to these, Katie, before I keep going?
No, I think you hit it.
Okay, well, we'll keep going, but again, we'll have more opportunities for questions. So those are a lot of criteria and priorities to think about. Kara has a question in the chat. Does Maine Community Foundation have a definition for permanent protection? You got any thoughts on that, Katie?
Um, that is a good question. I think about it as that the land, right, will be owned by a land trust, will have some sort of easement, or yeah, that's a good question. I guess an easement is what offers the permanent protection, right? But also ownership by a land trust. Maybe need to get back to you on that, unless Steph, you have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I can follow up on that because my assumption is that just from reading the applicant pool is like every single one is going to be permanently protected based on how they describe the project, but we're not necessarily looking at the legal paperwork in terms of thinking about like how permanent that is.
It's actually a really good question because I think maybe we haven't thought about that as much as we should.
I'm gonna just write that down, Kara. Think about. And in case you haven't guessed, Katie and I aren't necessarily experts on the actual like legal, like the conservation process side of things. We're more on the community engagement piece. So definitely have a lot to learn on the nuances. And I know some of you have some expertise on that. So maybe we can talk about that further along here. But just to think, so honing in further about what we these are the things we want you to be thinking about when you're reading the proposals. Again, we're the community foundation, so really thinking about community engagement. These are the practices that guide all our grant review processes. And in particular, these are the best practices for thinking about when you're reading your proposals. So we really want to begin from a place of trust. We come from the perspective when we're reviewing proposals that nonprofits are our partners and we give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the intentions, and we don't necessarily question whether the organization will be able to do. We just trust that it's that whatever the organization says they're planning to do is what they're going to do. We're also looking for programs and organizations that have members of the community engaged in their staff, their board, or their volunteers. So for this engagement piece, we're thinking about, we generally want to avoid supporting projects that maybe say they're serving a community, but don't provide actual evidence that the community wanted this project or will use this service. In this case, the land acquisition. So Um, that also ties into being responsive. We want to avoid, um, so we want to support the needs of the community. We realize that one size doesn't fit all. And so there might be more than one land trust in a community, for example, or more than one property. And like we understand that there's nuances within the community that we might not fully we might not fully understand the context of the community, but we trust and respond to the needs that the community has identified. So these are really important to think about when we're reviewing the grant proposals. Additionally, we're thinking about being open to learning about new organizations. So, for example, it might be a land trust that you don't know or you've never heard of. That shouldn't affect how you're reviewing the application. And tied to that is also thinking about we're okay to take risks. So maybe it's a new approach, maybe it's a new land trust or a new property. We're thinking about being okay to support things that might not be familiar to us. Also, we recognize that sometimes projects might not meet their goals for several reasons, especially in the land protection world. Mistakes and failure can be part of the process. So, for example, maybe a land protection project didn't meet its anticipated goals from last year when you reviewed. So we're saying that failure is okay, and we're not going to use that against them when they're applying again. So just want to flag Phil's question in the chat. We give organizations the benefit of the doubt. So if a certain plan seems too ambitious or unrealistic, should we not factor that into our review? I think that I'm going to go to the next. Oh, here we go. So this, I feel like, kind of gets to your question a little bit, Phil, about we're looking at the ideas proposed. So even if we might feel it's too ambitious or unrealistic, um, it might it might be something that the community has already planned, or there might be context that we might not necessarily know. This is a tricky question because we do want them to give us as much detail as they can. So the strongest grant application will convince us through letters of support, through their answers, that this project is going to happen. I'm wondering, Katie, if you want to speak to this question around like how much benefit of the doubt we give to the land protection applicants.
I mean, I think it's always tricky, right? This is an art, not a science. And
Yeah.
I think of it as sort of examining your bias or when you're feeling sort of doubtful about something, right? Like there are times when you read a proposal and you're like, I know these people, I know about this, like I'm not sure they're going to pull this off. Like taking a moment to think about like, why do you think that? Um, I think that I think it's perfectly reasonable to include in your notes like that if you have doubts about their capacity, but just like to take a minute to think about why you have those doubts to try to make sure as much as you can, because we're all humans, right? And we're full of bias. Um, but just thinking about like why you think that and making sure that we're all just like thinking that there are things that we don't all know and but I think it can be helpful to know if you do have doubts and why and being able to sort of explain them um and just like take that breath before sort of making those judgments, I guess. So it's sort of it's we want to know if you have doubts, right? But also taking into account that we want to trust these nonprofits and what they're saying as much as possible. And I know that's
Mm,
maybe not the exact answer you're looking for, but I feel like that's the best we can do as sort of humans reading these proposals.
mm, yeah. And I think part of so I'll get into our conflict of interest policy next, but Ideally, you're only reading proposals where you know nothing about the applicant, you know nothing about the organization, so you have less bias around like whether something can get done or not. And that's I find really helpful. Like if you're coming in fully fresh, you don't know anything about the project, ideally the grant proposal is well done enough that you can feel confident that it'll be successful. At the same time, these are our last best practices to think about. We are recognizing that a lot of the folks writing grant proposals aren't actual grant writers. A lot of them run programs. A lot of the land trusts applying are run by volunteers. So they're doing this outside of a 9 to 5 job. We also recognize that an imperfect application isn't necessarily indicating a lack of care. Applicants might not use the professional language of the field. They might have errors, and that's okay. We're thinking about we're looking for the community engagement, the community leadership, and also just recognizing the power dynamic that you are in a position of power being in this role, and just again kind of considering your own biases and positionality when you're reading these. And just like echoing Katie, I love the like it's an art, not a science. Like we're human, we're doing what we can to make this equitable and transparent, but of course, we're learning and never going to be perfect around this. Um, and so an important part of the process is really having you all disclose your conflicts of interest. The next step is you are going to read proposals. I'm going to actually email you your proposal assignments in the next couple days, tomorrow or Friday. You'll have about 6 proposals to read. I think what's important to add is that each proposal is going to be reviewed and scored by at least 3 different people. So that kind of helps take the pressure off you and realize that there's going to be multiple eyes on every proposal, so that maybe one person had some questions about it, but another person read it and thought it was really clear. We're going to get all of those different reviews and scores on each proposal. And so each proposal will have an averaged score based on at least 3 reviewers reading it and scoring it, as well as our staff here as well. And I'm going to get into the review form a little bit more, but yeah, this is just your little overview flow of you're reading the proposals, you're providing comments and scoring them in our online system, and you're doing this all in the next 3 weeks. And just to just looking at the Q&A. Let's see. Yeah, well, let's talk. I'll talk about the review form, Jamie, in a second. I just really want to hone in on the conflict of interest policy. So I emailed you all with the list of applicants with asking for if any conflicts of interest come to mind. Thank you to those of you who've emailed me already. If you haven't emailed me conflicts of interest, then I'm going to assume you don't have any. So after we talk today, please email me today or tomorrow if you do decide, actually, I think I have a conflict with this applicant. And again, it's in your email, and I'll follow up with you. So Maine CF uses a broad definition of conflict to include actual conflicts and perceived conflicts. So an actual conflict is like, I work there, I wrote the grant, or I'm on the board of this land trust that applied. And then the perceived conflict is where it's more nuanced. So the perceived conflict is, did you previously work there, or did you at some point serve on the board? Does your close friend or your family member work there or serve on the board? Were you part of an organization or coalition that helped develop the land protection project? So those would count as conflicts of interest. Those are kind of, again, we're taking this broad view around what that means. So ultimately, it comes down to a gut check. If your gut tells you maybe, then just put it as a conflict of interest, because we have plenty of reviewers, so it's fine to just assign you. So again, I sent out the list of the 17 organizations. Some of you let me know you already have conflicts with some of them, which is great. If you haven't, just email me back to let me know if you do have any conflicts of interest. And I'm going to use that to do the review assignments to make sure that you're only reviewing organizations that you have no perceived conflicts of interest with. And I'm just wondering, Katie, if you have anything to add on the conflicts of interest piece before I keep going, because I feel like it's an important one.
No, I think you covered all the same things that I always say. It's that that gut check, and like just declare it if you have a question, because there's plenty of reviewers.
Mm-hmm. And keep using the Q&A if you have questions on conflict of interest. And I know it's nuanced, but it's if you're like, I don't know if I do, maybe, then just say yes, you do, and just list it as a conflict, because it's just good to keep it as objective as we can, while inviting you to also bring your lived experience and expertise on the land protection world in Maine as well. So we just launched our new brand, working on getting the website updated, but this is what our homepage looks like. So if you have reviewed with us before, you just go right to our homepage, mainecf.org, and log in as you did last year, and you can reset your password if you don't remember it. See, so this is just our homepage, mainecf.org, and you're just going to this top right-hand corner login button. If you're a new reviewer and you're not in our online system, you should have this morning around 9 a.m. received an email from grant proposals at mainecf.org to set up your account. This might have gone to your junk folder or spam folder, so be sure to check that up as well. The subject line for the email will be Maine CF Reviewer Registration. There's a link, and you click on that link to activate your account. If you are, maybe it's your first time reviewing, but maybe you've been an applicant to Maine CF, you can log in as you have as an applicant. Again, you can reset your password if you don't remember it. And when you log in, if you have applied to our grant programs, any of our grant programs in the past, there will be a choice between logging in as an applicant and logging in as a reviewer. And you're going to click reviewer. You'll then be able to see, so once you log in, for everyone, whether you're new or returning, you'll be able to see all the proposals for this grant program. I'm going to send you your individual assignments via email, as well as a detailed PDF packet that walks you step by step through the online portal. I'm just going to show you a little, this is like the first step. So if you click on login on our website, mainecf.org, you'll go right to this pop-up and you click online grant system, login here. Then once you log in to the online system, if you've been, you can pick reviewer, and you'll be able to see all the applications, all 17. I'm only assigning you to read around 6 of them. So you only have to review the ones that you're assigned. And those assignments are going to be via email. I'm smiling because this could be a learning curve for your first time. So please reach out to me with questions if you're having any trouble. And I would recommend trying to get into the online system sooner rather than later, even though you have until October 25th. You might not want to wait till the last minute to make sure you can get in and review them okay. Um, Thoughts on the online system? Did I cover it, Katie? So once you get in there, there's going to be a review form. Everybody has the same review form that they fill out. The review form matches exactly what's on the website, which is exactly what's on the application, so that it's really consistent and transparent criteria every step of the way. So you're reviewing these proposals based on the criteria in the website and application. And it's like a one-pager form in the online system where you're able to kind of check off and add comments. We really appreciate the comments. It can be helpful, especially further down the line in the decision-making process to remember what we thought of each proposal. So you're going to give a little summary of the proposal, kind of checking the boxes, like, is it increasing access to land and water? Is there support from the community? Is there a vision for the future use? And then, does this grant, again, this is our priorities that we talked about. Is it a significant portion of the purchase price? Is it helping secure other funds? Does this project meet any other priorities? Again, not required, but it's helpful when it's a competitive pool. So thinking about access to cultural resources, working farmland, working fisheries, working forests, outdoor recreation, helping communities respond to climate change impacts, conserving critical habitat. So these are kind of like, you're just going through every proposal with this review form. And then this is the most important section, is the end of the review form. So you'll make sure the budget looks clear. You'll make sure that, and add any comments if anything's confusing. At the end, you're really scoring a 1, a 2, or a 3. So 1 is like, this is an awesome proposal, so Maine CF definitely should fund it. A 2 is like, we maybe, yes, should fund this, but maybe you have a little question about it. And then 3 is, you're actually saying you don't think Maine CF should fund this. It doesn't align with the criteria and priorities. What's really helpful is what I've highlighted here. If you can actually write out your comments on why you chose the score. So if you gave it a 1, why did it knock it out of the park for you? Like, why is it such a great proposal? If you gave it a 3, why are you suggesting that we shouldn't fund it? And then if you gave it a 2, really jotting down what are the concerns that are holding you back from giving it a full 1. So it's just a 1, 2, 3 system, and that's the whole review form. So pretty straightforward form, again, aligning exactly with the language in the application and the website. So just looking at Jamie's question now. So this is the form that previous reviewers have used and current reviewers are using. We're not providing an example of a filled out form because we don't necessarily want to bias you into like how exactly your comments should be. But overall, I would just say, like, don't write a paragraph, but a couple, 1 sentence, 2 sentences is great. I think what we want to avoid is only giving a checkbox and a score without any comments. That can be a little challenging because we don't really know where you're coming from with the score. So adding a few comments is really helpful, but not having to necessarily write out a bunch of stuff. Any thoughts, Katie, on Jamie's kind of question about looking at previous proposal reviews?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's no sort of right answer, right? We're looking for your perspective, like whatever, is coming to mind when you're reading these. And I also sort of want to remind you that your score, this can be really hard. It's hard to give threes, but just sort of remembering we're probably going to be able to fund 4 or 5 of these 17. So it's okay to be a little harsh. And what the other thing and it will also be sort of like all this is going to be sort of summarized together. Your review will not be the thing that determines everything. It's going to be, summarized with all these other reviews. There's a small committee that's going to look at all your reviews and talk about them. So we're really looking for your honest feedback. And I also, for twos, one of the things I often think with twos is those are the ones that I would fund if we had all the money in the world, but they don't rise to the top of the sort of ones. They don't sort of knock it out of the park. So that's sort of those are the things that I would add.
And thank you, that's helpful. So thinking about the flow, you're about to get your assignments, and you can begin reading and scoring applications once I send out that email saying who's reading which applications. And you have about 3 weeks to do those, read and score, and add comments. We do have so then we take all of your completed review forms and consolidate all of your feedback, average out all your scores. And then we have a small community advisory committee of longtime professionals in the land protection field who work with our Katie and I at Maine CF to basically see which proposals have risen to the top. For example, if a proposal has a 1 after being scored 3 or 4 times and every single person scored it a 1, that's like a top of the line proposal. So we look at which proposals have scored the highest, what the comments are, and do the formal award making process. And applicants should be notified by early December with email, and if they are awarded, then a check in the mail. And I'll actually email all of you to let you know once the decisions have been made and the organizations know, so that then you know what has risen to the top. So I'll be in touch via email on that process. And then I think importantly, we'll also send you a feedback form to let us know how the process went for you. Is there anything that you recommend us changing or tweaking for the future as we continue to evolve our participatory grant processes here? So this is our little timeline. And yeah, I would just close by saying you have about 3 weeks to do your reviews. Please just reach out to me directly via email, or you can call me if you just have any questions. And don't, no such thing as a silly question, like especially if this is your first time, totally just reach out if you're having trouble with anything. And again, if you're a new reviewer, your next step is to check your inbox, including your spam or junk folder, for an email from the grant proposals at Maine CF and set up to get into our system. And if you're returning, your next step is to see about logging in from our homepage to make sure you can log in. And you'll be getting an email from me tomorrow with your assignments. And then you get to start reading. And it's really fun reading the proposal. I think it's fun, at least. Hopefully you do too. We are offering a stipend for your time, and I'll be following up with you via email as well to get your W-9 and other info for that process. So basically, you're going to hear from me via email, but if you do have questions, you're also welcome to call or email me as well. Do you think, is there anything you'd add, Katie, from what I've shared?
I did want to add, I don't know if we covered this, just about confidentiality. So your reviews are not going to be shared with the nonprofits. You know, if they don't get a grant and they call us, we're not going to say, well, this reviewer said this. We really sort of summarize that information. We give them feedback that we think is helpful. But anything that you write in your review is confidential. Steph and I will see it. We have the two sort of advisors that help us make the decisions. They have access to see those, but we do summarize sort of the feedback and the comments that you guys make for them as well. So it's very much internal. So just want to like really support you in being like very honest, misspelling is fine. And, just making quick comments is fine. It all goes together. So I want you to make sure people feel like they can just be really honest in their reviews.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Knowing that everything that you're sharing in your review is confidential, and also on the flip side, like for you, especially if you're in the land trust community, like you're not necessarily sharing anything until I'll give you the go ahead by December 1st to let you know that the award announcements are going out publicly and the organizations have been notified. So trying to keep the process internal from here on forward. Okay, questions from all of that? That was a lot of me talking at you. Feel free to use the Q&A if you have questions. Also, you can reach out to me one-on-one after we close today as well.